This is Healthcare Now Radio's Talking the Walk. Come along with us as host Tom Testa and his guests discuss the strides being made toward actionable changes in the industry. It's a fast-paced 30 minutes, so keep up. And now, here's Tom Testa.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking the Walk. I'm your host, Tom Testa. Joining me today is Kelly Gibbons. Kelly is a client success advisor with Practicing Excellence and is a nurse with expertise spanning not only patient experience, but nursing education and healthcare quality and safety. Today, we're going to talk about the incredible versatility of a nursing career. Kelly, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, Kelly. And I also want to note that you are the winner of Healthcare Now Radio's Nurses to the Mic Radio Appearance Giveaway. So it's great. Yeah. I think you're our first ever. I'm happy to have you.
Yeah, super exciting.
Well, excellent. So, Kelly, we know part of your superhero powers is being a nurse. I want to talk a little bit about that. If you could just give us a quick intro about who's Kelly Gibbons, your career, and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. So this year will be 26 years that I've been a nurse, which sounds crazy to me that I'm past that 25-year mark. And I have had a pretty varied career, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just how amazing and varied the career can be. So from a clinical side, I've done everything from med-surg, labor and delivery, postpartum, the nursery, spent the bulk of my career in the operating room before I started transitioning over to leadership. So I was a staff development coordinator, did a little, general nurse administration duties in that role as well, learned a little bit of risk and quality, eventually found my passion in patient experience, and then kind of transitioned into that world where I helped lead a system-wide team over patient complaints and grievances, and then taking that data, hearing the patient's voice and saying, this is what they're saying. How can we make those processes better? I've also just recently finished working as a professor in an undergraduate program and now find myself at this amazing company, Practicing Excellence, where we help to operationalize the behaviors that drive performance to scale. So helping healthcare organizations build better skills around communication, how to lead effectively, how to build out their clinical excellence, high reliability teams. I'm over the nurse lead program, so teaching nurses how to lead effectively. So very, very career. And I'm at a point where I'm just so excited to look back at this career and look at all the things I've done.
Wow, that's great. And we're going to get into a lot of what you've done over your career and how that's impacted you today. Let's kind of dive into things, Kelly. When people think about nursing, they often picture bedside care, but your career, as you just kind of laid out, tells a much broader story. When did you realize just how versatile a nursing degree could be?
Yeah, so believe it or not, it took me a while to actually get to that point. So, I had graduated with my bachelor's and I really truly thought, hey, I'm going to be a bedside nurse. That's it. Boom. End of, that's my career. But you know what happened? I ended up getting burnt out with that mentality. And I actually got very depressed for a while thinking like, why did I become a nurse? Why? I don't think this is what I want to do. Fast forward, really finding a really great nurse leader who became a mentor and really pushed me and said, I see potential. You really should think about going back to school. And that's where I kind of, my eyes opened and said, okay, what can I do with this? And started diving into the different programs that were out there. Started to really pay attention to what goes on behind the scenes, right, of bedside nursing and say, okay, how are we getting to, these amazing workflows? Who's the people doing it behind the scenes? And realizing that it's the nurses really behind the scenes with their leadership ability to say, hey, we can fix workflows. We can be expertise in anything IT, and that's where I really, really started to understand like, okay, what else can I do with this degree? But it took me a long time to actually see that. You start off and that there's nurse leaders within your hospital system. That there's nurse educators. Obviously you have your professors from academia, and that's kind of like your small perspective, but after a while, you start to see what else is out there, and we can get into that because the stuff that's out there now that nurses are doing is absolutely unbelievable.
Well, that's interesting you say that because, yeah, you've certainly reinvented yourself along the way, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. What are some of the most surprising directions you've seen nurses take their careers?
So one of the things that's been blowing me away lately is listening and watching these different nurse entrepreneurs that are out there. So I was actually just reading on LinkedIn the other day. There's a company, I believe it's called Workforce IQ, and it was started by a nurse,
Okay.
right? And built this $1 million company and being able to leverage technology and workflows and putting it all together and helping systems go not go through attrition. And this was started by a nurse, right? And that blows my mind. There's Nurse Capital, that Nurse Capital group that's out there now, a venture capital fund started by nurses for nurses. And I laugh because I think about it and I say, when these nurses were back in school learning bed baths, right? Like the basic nursing 101, did they ever think in their career that they would be running these $1 million companies? So that's amazing. The other thing that is super surprising is the entertainment of nurses out there. And so what I mean by that is we look at people like Nurse Blake, Nurse John, Nurse Dan is another one big on social media. There is an actor on the pit right now who plays a nurse who is a nurse in real life.
Oh.
So coming into this whole entertainment world, they're really putting nursing on the map. They're selling out shows. It's really fun to see. That's like a really like crazy aspect of nursing that I never thought would come like, full circle, that we're looking at these nurses from an entertainment aspect, which is also so great because it helps us nurses with resilience, being able to laugh at ourselves and it's really a way to give back to the community. So very surprising little way right there.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the nurses are entering into that, like you said, that influencer space, right? Do you consider
Yes.
yourself, I mean, do you consider yourself an influencer?
Great question. Probably not in the sense of like the Nurse Johns and the Nurse Blakes out there, but in a way that, I've been able to do fun things like this, like coming on a podcast. I've done filming for, practicing excellence before I was even a full member of practicing excellence. So things like, getting a little bit of that media exposure is, again, something I never thought as a nurse I'd, be able to do.
And it sounds like too, like so there's certainly plenty of nurses that are still at the bedside, and it's much needed, and it's we understand the burnout and stuff like that, Kelly. But talk to us about what about the nursing foundation that makes it so adaptable across different parts of healthcare that you've been kind of hinting at.
Yes. So I actually have thought about this topic a lot. And, I think when we go into the field, we as nurses start to develop like transferable ways of thinking, the way that we assess responding to human needs, right? These are all foundations. And no matter who you are, let's say you are a CEO of a huge company, responding to human needs always needs to be your North Star, right?
Hmm.
And who better to understand that than a nurse, right? We have that foundation. We look at the physical, we look at the emotional, the social, the cultural, the environmental factors, right? That we're always considering those. And we also learn how to prioritize problems in a really complex, fast-moving way, right? Think about like those ED nurses. They're constantly, their minds are going. We learn to look at things from a risk standpoint, a safety standpoint, a quality standpoint. A lot of nurses know how to understand to take evidence-based research and apply it to, change management. That's a lot of skills for one person to have. And a nurse, you can check all those boxes. And it makes it not only that they're adaptable across healthcare, you can throw us into any company and we would be able to adapt, right? Like I think of myself, I don't have an MBA. I don't have a business degree, right? I have a master's in leadership and management within healthcare, but I'm not a numbers crunching person, right? But I'm able to bring my skills, my foundations as a nurse and say, I'm not the one to crunch the numbers for you, but I can look at those numbers and say, how does this affect patient care? How do these numbers affect the patient bottom line? That's where my foundations as a nurse are transferable to all these other different careers that you can have out there.
That makes perfect sense too. And we're going to get a lot into that patient experience and your impact there, and your opinions on that as well. But backing up a little bit, you did start in clinical care. How did that experience shape the way you approach that patient experience and healthcare leadership today?
Yes. So there's two parts to that answer. Okay. So for leadership, one thing that I've always been really, really good at is being observant. And so early on in my career, bedside, I always watched my nurse leaders very, very, very closely.
Mhm.
And so I was able to quickly see good modeling behavior and poor modeling behavior. And I built on that as I went through my career. What did I see that worked that made me feel good, that made, my other colleagues feel good? This modeling behavior that these leaders were doing. And I was able to bring that over with me. From a patient experience standpoint, from a flip side, I looked at it from a lens of when I was a patient. So, for example, when my son was born, both him and I had medical complications during that birth, right? So I quickly was on now the flip side. I was no longer the nurse, I was the patient. And I think what happens for us that are in healthcare, such as nurses, like we almost go into secret shopper mode because we're looking at it from the lens like, oh, they did it this way, they're doing it that way. I can see how if I go back into my practice as a nurse, what felt good and what didn't feel good, right? We're able to now take empathy and actually say, yes, I did walk a mile in your shoes. Even my husband had a couple of different medical episodes over the last 5 years. And now being the loved one in that situation and not the nurse, the same thing. So being in those positions actually brought over what I felt was super important from a patient experience. Now being a patient experience leader, actually flipping it around. So that's been interesting.
That is. Is it a question? Is it hard being when you're seeing a loved one or even yourself needing medical attention like that, being on the other side, watching the nurses
Oh
do their
yes.
job? Is it hard? And not that they're not doing a great job, but what's it like in your shoes there?
Yeah, I think any nurse will attest to this that when they are either the patient or the loved one of the patient, the other sometimes the other nurses are like, "Oh no, she's a nurse," because they know you're going to ask all the questions. But it was interesting too because in my case, what I found interesting is now looking back. My son is 17 next week. When I was in that situation, it was almost like I couldn't remember any of my health nursing training. Like they were talking words to me, and I was like going in one ear, going out the other ear. So that's another perspective too. Is sometimes you just when it is a loved one or yourself, you kind of almost like you blank out, like you that you're not a nurse anymore too. So it's a very weird perspective that kind of happens there sometimes.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Talking the Walk on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm Tom Testa, and joining me today is Kelly Gibbons. Kelly, I want to talk a little bit about nurses sometimes when they move away from the bedside somewhere, they're leaving patient care behind, right? Maybe, maybe not. What's your perspective on how impact actually expands in those roles for nurses like who do move away from the bedside of things?
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally get this because for a while, I've lived that feeling. There were some points during my recent leadership career that I almost felt like a fraud if I called myself a nurse because I have not touched a patient physically in, X amount of years, or, maybe I haven't actually talked to a patient in the last year. And a lot of emotions, go with that too. But what I had to do is take like a big step back, look at that 360 view and say, okay, what is the impact once I moved away from bedside? And the impact is there because now we're using our skills in a different way. So we can go back and say, okay, look at this workflow. If it, we worked on X, Y, and Z to fix this problem for the patient, right? So we're still nurses. We're just using our brains in a different way, and in a way that is very unique to the healthcare, landscape. Because again, we are the ones that are with the patients more than anybody. We're the ones who are the boots on the ground and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So. I know that feeling of feeling like, am I still a nurse? Because I get it because I'm living it. But at the end of the day, once a nurse, always a nurse. And I can also attest to this because if you know, like anybody in your family, your neighbors, someone will always be like, oh, this person's a nurse and they coming to you for everything under the sun. So I still get that every day of my life. So always a
No,
nurse.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once a nurse, always a nurse. And that, yeah, I wouldn't not want to go talk to Kelly just because, maybe you haven't been on the bedside for a while. No, that makes sense. Kelly, I want to talk a little bit more about you're a certified patient experience professional. How do you see nurses uniquely positioned to lead improvements in patient experience?
Yes. So this is an easy answer. And I think I just kind of talked about it. We're the boots on the ground. There's
Yeah.
nobody else in a hospital that is with a patient more than a nurse, right? If they're inpatient, type of setting, we hear the patient's voice every day, all day. We know what makes them happy. We know that what makes them angry. We know what workflows are working, what workflows aren't working, and we know what needs improvement, right? And because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are with the patients more than anything. And if you're working in an organization that truly embodies what a culture of nursing excellence is, then they should be giving their nurses a seat at the table to help with those changes.
And I also think too, or I'll ask you, talk about the families of these patients. That's also part of the patient experience, is it not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many behavioral skills that we can, teach nurses or anyone in healthcare so they're not forgetting about the patient, because they are so important. And there's data out there that actually shows, a patient's well-being, their healing is a lot of times directly proportional to their support system,
Exactly.
having their family there, especially if we're talking about, different cultural, and we can do a whole podcast just on that. But yes, absolutely. And that's another reason why a lot of successful healthcare organizations have patient family advisory councils. So we're actually bringing the patients and the families together to share their voice to make, changes, improvements based on the care and the history that they have had at that healthcare system.
Kelly, what are organizations still, well, what are they not getting right about the patient experience? Talk to us about that.
Yes, that's a great question. So probably the thing I see the most is everybody is overcomplicating things. So forgetting about the basics. And when I say the basics, pulling a chair up next to the patient you're talking to so you're eye level, right? Basic. But there's a big bang for the buck there. Patients love that. They love it when they're looking at you and talking with you, right? Another thing is making these elaborate patient experience plans and throwing data and you know here's the thing, data, yes, we need the data. Data is gold, right? I'm not saying to not look at the data, but when you're taking data and you're throwing it at the average healthcare staff person, it's not going to stick. What they're forgetting too is that it has to start at the top, that modeling behavior. If our leaders are not modeling good patient experience behaviors, then your staff, everyone underneath it, is not going to. So back to the basics, modeling that great behavior. They know that they have to make the changes, right? They know what they need to do, but being able to have those skills to put it in place and having the rest of the team bring that up is probably it's the easiest thing, but it's the hardest thing a lot of times for these healthcare organizations to kind of wrap their heads around.
Kelly, I want to ask you about what opportunities exist today for nurses outside of traditional health system roles.
There are actually so many, and it's really kind of like brought life back into the profession, I would say. So, a lot of IT based jobs, right? We're even kind of getting to that whole AI, life of AI coming into the healthcare system. But things like healthcare writing, organizations, companies, magazines, web pages, they love being able to say that the author is a healthcare professional, a nurse, right? So that is a really popular one. Anything remote based, right? Nurses love having flexibility. They love being able to maybe balance, motherhood with that. Remote jobs are huge. You'll see a lot of that with clinical documentation integrity type of jobs, working with insurance companies with case management. Forensics is a really cool one. Whether you are what we call like a sane nurse, where you're a part of the team for any sexual assaults that come into your facility. Pharmaceutical sales and med device sales.
Hmm.
Another big one. Probably one of the ones, it's a hot job right now for nurses to go into. And because these companies love to hire nurses because we have the clinical background, right? We know medicine, we know drugs, we know, even for med device, those of us who've worked in an operating room, like we can walk into an operating room and feel comfortable there. Um, Aesthetics is like a huge one right now, depending on what state you live in and with what's in scope of practice. But someone with an associate's or bachelor's degree can be doing Botox and fillers. Um, Even things
Hmm.
like, so, okay, on the side, I'm a Pilates instructor. And my
Oh,
nursing background actually ties in beautifully with that. So just this week, I had a client who had Ehlers-Danlos, and she came in. I always say to my clients, do you have, what's going on with you? Do you have anything I need to know about? And she was a brand new client, and she said, I have ED. And immediately knowing what she was talking about, it said Ehlers-Danlos. And we were able to sit there and have a whole conversation and figure out how to modify for her. So that, again, it goes back to the testament that nurses, we can do so many different things with that degree.
that's great. And yeah, no, that's interesting because sometimes you do something like that. You'll go to like maybe a Pilates, which well, by the way, I've never taken a Pilates class, but probably should. Might help me be a little more flexible in life. But they'll ask you those questions like, what are your medical conditions? They kind of get into that stuff, and it's great to have knowing someone like a Kelly's on the other side of that, helping guide them through that.
Yep.
Um, Kelly, what do you think, or do you think the industry is doing enough to help kind of highlight those pathways? Are they doing enough? Or are they not?
Yes and no. So, right off the bat, I don't know if you're familiar with the Department of Education's proposal of the reclassification of nursing as a quote unquote professional degree. This has been a hot topic all over the news. And, essentially, yes, I understand where the department's coming from is that they're saying it's purely administrative for determining loan limits. But to an outside person looking in, hearing this, that might make or break whether or not they want to go into the profession. Just listening to this and not knowing the back end of it and saying, wait, nursing's not professional, then why am I going to go get a bachelor's degree? Why am I even going to go get an associate's degree? So that is kind of, making things a little hard right now. But on the flip side, I would actually say social media has probably had the biggest influence in highlighting these pathways. I cannot go onto any social media platform. We'll take TikTok, for example, right? And there's some type of nurse doing some type of content, whether it's follow me a day in the life as, me being a remote nurse, me going to my aesthetics practice. And that's really, and again, back to the entertainment, Nurse John, Nurse Blake. It's really kind of highlighted and put things back on the map and has gotten people excited about going into a nursing program. And case in point, you can look at any nursing program in the United States right now, and it's super hard to get in because so many people are now wanting to go back into nursing.
Wow, that's so encouraging to hear. That's great. In fact, looking ahead, how do you see the role of nurses evolving as healthcare, as the industry continues to change, especially with technology? You talked about AI entering into the mix, things like that. So, as these nurses are getting into, as the nursing schools are filling up, which is great, what's the industry doing for those future nurses to help kind of navigate the changes in the healthcare system?
Yeah, I think we have to go back to the fact that we can't lose sight that no matter where this technology is going, we always need people on the back end. The company that I work for right now has this beautiful AI tool. I was having the conversation with someone, are these tools going to take over? Or, how do you still have, you can't run a health IT company, right? Or an AI company that is a healthcare product, but not have somebody on the back end who knows healthcare. So I think at the end of the day, there always will still be this need for nurses to go into like these back end type of IT companies. I think also with the amount of different graduate programs out there,
Mhm.
when I first graduated 25 years ago with my bachelor's, it was kind of rare if you knew someone who had a master's degree. It was just, becoming popular. And now there's these schools have these amazing programs that span everything from informatics. There's nurse entrepreneurship, nurse innovation grad programs now that we're actually promoting nurses, by educating them how to be an innovator, how to be an entrepreneur. And that's really going to just help keep evolving the program.
Wow, that's outstanding, Kelly. For got a little more time with you left I want to ask you for someone considering nursing or even a nurse feeling stuck, maybe going through that burnout you described a little bit at the start of your journey. What would you want them to hear from your journey, your story that might help them turn the chapter, get to the next page?
Yeah, I think the one interesting thing about the nursing profession is it is almost celebrated to have a very varied resume. You
Hmm.
go to maybe another type of a business type of job interview, and they might look at your resume and be like, oh, why did you do this, this, and this? Where, it's actually benefited me in my leadership because it's given me a broad perspective across many different, you know, fields of within a healthcare system. So if I had to give advice for people trying to navigate, number one, ask questions. This is my number one thing I tell all my, when I used to precept nurses, when I was teaching an undergrad, questions, questions, questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Watch and learn and get a good mentor. That is gold right there. If you have a good mentor that kind of, you're able to see what works well, what doesn't work, it's going to help you navigate where you want to go next. So you might say, you know what? I love this person. I'm watching them, I'm observing them, but I really don't like their role. So you pivot, right? Another thing I would say is to network. Okay. So networking is gold. My biggest advice would be, I know there's people out there, like LinkedIn is a gold mine, right? I mean, this is how I ended up here with you today, is through LinkedIn, essentially.
Right.
What I think happens is a lot of young people, whether they're, young in whatever career they are, or definitely in nursing, they think LinkedIn is for very established people, very, high up leaders. You can start LinkedIn now you can start. I've seen successful people who are nursing students post and be able to network successfully. Go for it. Put yourself out there, set up a LinkedIn account, start posting. Even if you don't post, just learn. Just go in and follow different people, and it's going to help you lead and navigate your way through your career. So maybe you start following someone who's this great nurse educator because you want to go into education. So that would be like my biggest advice for anyone trying to navigate, all the different paths that you can go through in nursing.
Kelly, that's outstanding advice, and really, you just listening to you today, your passion, your inspiration. I think what a great advocate, everything for the nursing industry. So they're lucky to have you, and I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks, Tom.
If you'd like more information on Practicing Excellence, visit their website at practicingexcellence.com. You can also connect with Kelly on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on Talking the Walk. Tune in to hear us weekdays at 8:30 a.m., 4:30 p.m., and 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can also find all of our episodes on the Talking the Walk program page on healthcarenowradio.com. If you're walking the talk, we want to talk to you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or by filling out the show's contact form on healthcarenowradio.com. Until next time, I'm Tom Testa. Take care, everyone.